Hello, everyone. My name is George Abraham, and I'm the author of Birthright with Button Poetry. This is my debut poetry collection, and it recently was a winner of the Arab American Book Award, the Big Other Book Award, and a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Bisexual Poetry. It is my first full length collection, and I guess the big thing that it centers around is my first trip back to Palestine. I am a Palestinian American poet who was born and raised in the U.S. South, and as I said, I identify as queer. And actually, I also use they, them pronouns and identify as non binary. And so the book is kind of structured as a three-part. Part one is sort of geographically takes place in the U.S. South and goes into my upbringing, kind of autobiographical poetics on queerness, southernness, Palestinianness, and the kind of entanglement of these three things. Part two is actually the journey back to Palestine and actually takes place in Palestine. And part three kind of reckons with the after of that. What does this mean for me going back to America? Back to what does this mean for my notion of home? Who I consider home to be, where I consider home to be, how we build constructs of home in and among ourselves. And I think kind of one of the biggest challenges, this book was written over the course of several years, like 7 or 8 years of poetry, actually, to be exact. And one of the biggest challenges I had is kind of reckoning with all the selves I was as I wrote, this book. And I wanted to sort of build space in the book for all of my former selves, if that makes sense. I wanted to show the self I was in high school struggling with queerness, and the self I was when I first visited Palestine, and the self I was and am still becoming in this sort of after space of return. And what is the relationship between return and selfhood is kind of a big question that I want to think about. And I actually got started with poetry in the slam poetry scene, spoken word scene, and therefore Button Poetry often publishes a lot of spoken word books or books from the spoken word community. So I thought that was a very appropriate choice to for publishing Birthright, and I think that is an interesting kind of journey, sort of translating my poems from the stage, so to speak, to the page, so to speak. The when we bring our work to the page, a lot of slam artists, are go through this process of learning. Okay, what is this new toolkit that I have at my disposal? I have, I can do things like visually innovative poems, right? I can have poems that sort of break the nonlinear structure, and how is that in and of itself a kind of performance? Whereas there are some poems that look just like a regular poem, right? How am I using the line, the stanza, these kind of basic aspects, tone, velocity, etc., of voice, pace, to translate my performance and my reading of the poems onto the page? And so that's kind of something I went through as I wrote this book. And one of the sort of fun things that I've also gotten into is poetic form. How can poetic form itself be a site of performance? How can we queer the sonnet? How can we introduce different new forms that we invent ourselves? That's to say, the poem we have in our hearts and in our minds doesn't ascribe to like a traditional sort of form. And so where can I invent a form that will create the kind of treatment of language that I want? And so yeah, This is the book. I hope you all enjoy it. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Intifada Batata, INTIFADA and my website is gabrahampoet.com. If you want to look up my publications or check out the book. Thank you all so much.